If you're planning a trip to Italy, this is the podcast for you. Here's a 30-second teaser of the episode.
The south of Italy is probably the best place for a budget traveler to be. Things are going to be cheaper across the board. The more rural you go, I'd say like a little farther south you go, you're going to encounter like less English speakers. A lot of people definitely do speak English, but it's not going to be like as widespread as if you're like say in Rome or Milan. Overall, Italy is pretty safe, but it does just kind of vary by like region and north or south. Mount Etna in Sicily, the most active volcano in all of Europe. You climb the volcano and the entire place feels like alive. It kind of feels like you're on another planet, to be honest.
So, our Italy expert today plays a huge role at Travel Lemming as our managing editor. Originally from the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, now local to Chicago, welcome to the show, Lea Rose Allbaugh.
Hi. Hi, Betty. I'm happy to be here. Like she just said, my name is Lea Rose Allbaugh. I'm Travel Lemming's managing editor, and Italy is my favorite place. I've been tons of times, and I'm excited to just dive into it today. Talk all things Italy.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't know me, I'm your host, Betty Hurd, and this is the Travel Lemming podcast. So, I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Tortuga Backpacks. More on them in a bit. Also, if you're a fan of the show, make sure to like and subscribe to keep up with the best travel advice on the web. So I'm thrilled to talk to you, Lea Rose, about our favorite country. And yeah, so you're not from Italy, but you're our expert today for a reason. Can you tell our listeners about your experiences in the country?
Yeah, so I would say it all kind of started with the fact that my grandma, she was Sicilian. So I'm part Sicilian. So I am part Italian. But I think just like growing up, she instilled like a love of Italy in me. Just she was really passionate about just the country and Italian culture and just like kind of keeping it alive, even though, we obviously weren't living there or anything. So I feel like that kind of sparked a little bit of interest in visiting Italy and learning more about it at a young age. And then I actually got to go there with her and my mom when I was 14. That was the first time I went. And we traveled all around the country, including to Sicily, because she had like some relative's wedding that we attended. So we did that. And then my family also hosted an Italian exchange student for a year. And so we met up with him while we were on that trip. And then a few years later, I did an exchange program. And it wasn't in Italy, but my host mom happened to be Italian, so we ended up going on a whole vacation to Italy during my exchange, and then that just I don't know, I really loved Italy after those experiences, and then I ended up doing my study abroad program in college, in Florence, Italy, so I spent an entire semester there, which was wonderful, and I would say I used to speak pretty decent Italian. Right now it's pretty rusty, but I think like back in the day I definitely would have like good conversational Italian. And I also just I visited recently last year. So again, going up and down the country all over. So I've gotten to see a lot of different areas across the country and not just like one particular region. So there's just a lot to see and do. And I love the country so much.
So cool. Yeah. So you know a lot of people there. You have family there. You're part Italian. You studied there, many, many different trips there. So that's awesome. So, to our listeners, Lea Rose has tons of Italy guides. The broader ones being the 35 best places to visit in Italy, which we'll cover more in a little bit. She also has guides and itineraries for lesser known destinations in the country. So, she really has written something for every kind of traveler. If you haven't been to Italy or if you're planning a return trip, make sure to check out Lea Rose's articles for guidance after the episode at travellemming.com and type in Italy in the search bar. We'll link them in the show notes. Okay, so we're going to address trip planning advice, the best places to visit, how to get around, safety, just everything you need to know to plan the perfect trip to Italy in a bit. But I want to start by asking you, why should someone choose Italy over other European destinations? Like, what makes it unique?
I would say, obviously, like going to Europe, there are a lot of similarities like between European countries. But with Italy specifically, I just think Italy and the culture and the people are so distinct. Like they're just Italian, you know what I mean? And I think as far as like reasons to go, I would say the big ones would be like food, art and history, and like scenery and nature. With food, who doesn't love Italian food? It's just obviously like it's a very like well-loved cuisine around the world. I don't know, for whatever reason, it just, like, appeals to everybody's palates. I don't know, it's the cheap
It's
of
my
the
favorite thing
soul
in the whole world.
It's so good.
Mhm.
So, food's obviously a big thing, and the cuisine varies a lot, like, based on what region you're in, and so I think, like, you can go and be like, "I want pasta, I want pizza," and you can definitely have that, and it'll be, like, fantastic, but there's so much more to the cuisine just based on where you are. So, like, in Milan, their risotto is really big. And then down in Florence, you'll get a lot of like steak as well as just like wine because that's wine country. The wine is so good. And then, like Naples, pizza, that's where you're gonna get there. And then like you go into the south of Sicily and have a lot of like, seafood. There's just a bunch of different things in different places and it's all really great. So I think food's a huge reason to visit. And then as far as like art and history goes, I think Italy itself is just such a hub and such a center for so much important art. And Florence specifically is known as like the birthplace of the Renaissance. It has the most Renaissance artwork than like any place in the world. And I just think there's an abundance of really incredible art. And even if you're not a huge art lover, I still think you can appreciate some of the beauty and like amazing sculptures and paintings and all of the museums. And then for nature, for instance, there's just a lot of diverse scenery throughout the country. So, there's like really tall, dramatic mountains in the north, and then there's beautiful beaches and coastlines, there's countryside, there's volcanoes, and there's just like a lot of diverse scenery. So I think those are the big things that people should keep in mind when they're planning a trip.
Yeah, I really do think that there's something for everyone in Italy because it's just such a diverse culture.
Definitely.
Today's episode is sponsored by Tortuga Backpacks. I took my 40-liter travel backpack light on a 6-day trip to Japan during the winter. So I was able to fit 6 days worth of clothing in there, including my bulkier winter wear like my thermals, a winter jacket, along with my laptop, a book, and an extra camera lens. With the hip and chest belts clipped, it didn't cut into my back and shoulders like I've experienced with other backpacks. Oh, and all of their bags are carry-on friendly, so they'll fit in the overhead bins of any airline. As a flight attendant, I was pleasantly surprised by the convenience of this backpack, especially because I'm someone who is so used to traveling with a suitcase. If you want to take along all the essentials for your travels and never have to worry about checking a bag or paying extra fees, check out Tortuga Backpacks. Click the link in the show notes to get 10% off your first order, or visit travellemming.com/Tortuga to pick your perfect pack today. So, what are, in your opinion, where are the best cities in Italy? And can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, so the big cities, would be Milan, Rome, Florence, Naples, Venice. Yeah, those are, like, the big ones, and then obviously there's a ton more, but I think those are the ones that people think of when they think of traveling to Italy, and, they all offer, like, a little bit something different. I think what they all have in common is just, like, charming architecture, a lot of art. Yeah, but those are the big ones. I have my opinions about which ones are my favorite and which ones aren't my favorite, but we can get into that.
Yeah, we'll definitely discuss a little bit more as we get deeper into the episode. So, with that, where do you suggest someone stays who has never been to Italy?
So, for someone who's never been to Italy before, I think I would suggest doing like 2 to 3 cities and then kind of doing day trips from those places. That way you can still, you can spend a good amount of time in these places and really get a feel for them as well as like, going on day trips and seeing something different. So, if it's your very first time, I think Rome, that's a given just because, capital of Italy, I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of Italy, just like the Colosseum and like Trevi Fountain, like that type of stuff. If you haven't been, you have to go. So definitely Rome. And then I would say Florence for sure. I'm biased because I spent a lot of time in Florence, but I really think it's like one of the best cities in Italy, or if not the best, just because it's so like classically Italian. You're going to get a good mix of like art and food and culture. And then I think Venice, just because Venice is another like super like, it's a bucket list place for a lot of people, and even though it's touristy, there's definitely no place quite like Venice, so I would do Rome, Florence, Venice, and then, you could circle back to Rome if you're flying out of there, and then do day trips from those places, like I was saying. So, for instance, from Florence, you could do a day trip to Cinque Terre, which is, like, the 5 towns along the coast, and that way you can have, like, a taste of the coast while also, going to these big cities, so I would say that's the route to take if you're a first-time visitor.
Yeah, and so you mentioned like there's very different cities in the north and the south and the middle. How long does it take, do you think, to get around Italy? Like if someone's planning a trip and they want to see different spots all across the country, how much time do you think they should set aside for a trip to just Italy?
Ooh, honestly, like, to see kind of everything. I mean, I still haven't seen
Of
everything, and I've been
course.
so many times, but I would honestly say, like, a month. I feel like even in, like, 3 weeks, you can definitely see a lot, but, like, you're not gonna reach everything, you're not gonna have enough time for everything. So, like, if you wanted to go, like, hit all the major cities and go, like, north to south, including Sicily, and, like, maybe you wanna do something different and also go to, like, Sardinia, then, yeah, a month for sure.
Yeah.
And I think you could just, like, start in any of the major cities and kinda make work your way around, but I think, like, a something that a lot of people would do is start in Rome just because a lot of airlines fly into Rome, and then from there, you kind of loop your way north around the country, and then you kinda go back down, maybe go to Sicily, and then hit your way back up to Rome. So, yeah, I think a month would give you enough time to do a lot, see a lot. It would honestly probably still be a bit rushed, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense, and obviously, probably most people don't have a full month to to travel. So,
I wish, yeah.
yeah, of course, but that means, cut that in half and you can probably cover a really good portion of one side of the country, right? So maybe, like, take 10
Definitely.
days to 2 weeks to cover the whole southern part of Italy, or maybe go up north
Yeah.
to the mountains, and does that sound like it would be a pretty substantial amount of
Yeah.
time?
I would say that would be, like, another suggestion of mine, honestly. Like, if, let's say you have, like, 10 days, 2 weeks to go to Italy, it is tempting to see everything and to wanna see everything, but I think focusing in on one area, one region is probably the smart thing to do, and then, you can always do repeat visits. Yeah, so for instance, like, maybe sticking to the north and doing, like, Florence and Milan and the Lakes District and, maybe you go over to Venice or something like that. Or you focus on the south of Italy and you do, like, Naples, Amalfi Coast, and then maybe a little bit farther south, maybe just do Sicily. I think it kinda depends on what you're looking
Yeah, of
for,
course.
but yeah, focusing in on one region is, like, a smart thing to do. And there's so many towns and just little day trips that you can take from just about anywhere that you're going to experience a lot and see a diverse amount of things anyway,
Okay, awesome.
really.
Where do you suggest a budget traveler stay in Italy?
The south of Italy is probably the best place for a budget traveler to be just because generally things are going to be cheaper, like across the board as far as flights and trains, like hotels, just all of that, food. And I think it's a little bit more overlooked compared to like more popular places in the north. So you're just going to get cheaper rates. But also you won't miss out on like great food and, good art, good museums, good nature. There's still tons of that. So that's what I would focus on.
Yeah, awesome. What are some other notable places to visit in Italy?
Ooh, there's so many I could probably give you. I would say maybe some that are like tiny bit more off the beaten path would be Lake Garda is a big one. So like a lot of people think to go to Lake Como because it's really famous. A lot of celebrities go there, like villas. It's just beautiful. But there are like three major lakes over there. And the biggest one, I believe, fact check me, but I believe the biggest one is Lake Garda. And it's just a little bit more like family friendly. And you're still going to get the same like incredible scenery, but and cute little towns and everything, but it's gonna be a little bit cheaper than going to Lake Como, so I would say Lake Garda is a great one. Spending time in Chianti and just, like, the, like, Tuscan countryside, like, outside of Florence, I think that's a must, especially if you're, like, really into wine. I have a friend who lives just, like, south of Florence, and so when I was visiting last year, she took my friends and I, like, on a little day road trip, like, all around Chianti, sampled wine, we went to a vineyard, and I think it's just, like, really, really beautiful, but also a little harder to get to sometimes if you don't have a car, which is, I mean, that's a great place to like take a tour if you don't have a car, if you're not comfortable like driving around. So yeah, definitely like Chianti for wine. I would say Capri. Like Capri is really touristy and a lot of people know to go there, but honestly, like I personally think it's worth the hype. I've been twice and I'm so lucky to have been twice now, but it's just like the beauty and the scenery is like, unparalleled. It's really, like, awe-inspiring, to be honest with you. Like, when I went last year, I went to the very top of the island, and that was something I hadn't done the very first time I went, and it's just, like, soaring view as far as you can see, you know? You just, like, you see, like, mainland Italy. It's just, like, incredibly beautiful. So, Capri's definitely worth it just for, like, the scenery, and also, there's some good shopping in Capri. Like, I've got some cute stuff when I was over there. But yeah, that's a good one. Polignano a Mare, that is a really cute little town. Well, I guess technically it's like a small city, but it kind of feels like a town in the south of Italy. I believe it's in Puglia, the Puglia region. And it's just very like whitewashed buildings, like that hang like on the edge of the cliff, like overlooking the ocean. And that's a great one. I could go on. Should I go on?
Yeah, no, I think you've covered some really awesome spots, like both major cities and then off the beaten path. And again, for listeners, Leah Rose has an awesome article on the 35 best places to visit in Italy where she really goes into all of these places. So if you want to take a deeper dive after the episode, I highly recommend checking out that article, which again will be linked in the show notes. So I wanna ask you, when is the best time of year to visit Italy?
I would say the late spring, early summer, and an early fall. So the shoulder seasons is, I think, what we would typically call them. Just because the summer is so popular and it's so crowded in Italy and it gets really, really hot. I remember one summer I was in Milan and no joke, the pavement was so hot that literally like the bottoms of the chairs were making indentations in the pavement
Oh
because
my
it was like
god.
getting yeah, so hot. But yeah, again, also just really crowded and everybody's there. And
Mhm.
so I think a better time to visit is late spring because also like a lot of times things are in bloom, like things are still going to be like lush. It's not going to be as dreary and depressing. And then early fall is nice too. But yeah, I think you're still going to have like nice weather, probably slightly cheaper prices, and then less crowds. A lot of places are still honestly going to be crowded, like even during the shoulder seasons just because Italy is so popular, but it's not going to be as hectic. So I think just kind of planning your visit in one of those times is the best way to go.
Okay.
July and August specifically, I think are the busiest for sure. I think there's like a stereotype that's like, don't go to Italy or like, don't go to Rome in August because it's so hot and it's so crowded. But I would say if you can avoid July and August, that's what I would do.
So I know it's a loaded question, and you've already covered a couple of these things in different areas in different cities, but what do you think are the best things to do in Italy?
So I kind of covered this a little bit earlier because I said the big things were just kind of like food, art and history, and then like scenery and nature. But then I would say within those buckets, there's definitely some things that you shouldn't miss. So for food, I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but coffee, like you have to have coffee, specifically like espresso. Just because I've never had it like espresso quite like what I get in Italy, like anywhere else. And I've had amazing coffee in like so many other places around the world, but there's just something about Italian espresso that I don't know, it hits different and it's just so good. But I just think coffee culture is really big there. It's also like a little bit different than it is in the US, you know. You're not really going to get like your iced latte. Also, that's another thing. If you ask for a latte, that just means milk, so you'll get milk.
Good.
But yeah, my favorite thing is, like, an espresso macchiato, which is just, like, a little bit of espresso with a tiny bit of foamed milk. So, yeah, coffee in general. Lotto, you have to have it. For wine, like I said, if you can be in, like, wine country or around Chianti, definitely take advantage of that. One of my favorite wines to have was literally just, like they call it, like, a house wine or a table wine, which is basically, like, a complimentary red wine that's just on the table when you go to a lot of restaurants. And honestly, that was just, like, one of my favorite things. It was just cheap, but, like, really, really great. And, you know, pasta and pizza everywhere. Pizza specifically in Naples, but yeah, food's huge, and then for art, I think if you're really big into art, you need to go to Florence for sure, like, that is the center for it. The Uffizi Museum is huge. It has, like, the most Renaissance artwork in the world. It's just a huge museum. It has so many, like, masterpieces by, like, Botticelli, and yeah, it's just an incredible museum, and then also Florence is home to the Accademia Gallery, which has the statue of David, which is if you haven't seen it, it is really impressive to see in person, so definitely go. And then there are obviously so many other museums with so many great pieces of art for history and scenery and that type of thing. It really just depends on what you like if you want, like, mountains, or if you want the beach. But I think going into the north, like, where the Lakes District is, as well as going farther up into, like, the Alps and where the Dolomites are. I think that for sure can be an amazing trip if you are really into, like, lakes and mountains and that type of thing. But also, like, for beaches and stuff, like, the Amalfi Coast is amazing, Sicily is amazing, Sardinia has beautiful beaches, so, yeah, it all just kinda depends on what you want, but there's no shortage of nature.
Yeah, I went to the Dolomites. It was my graduation trip from high school with my best friend, and I don't think I've ever
Nice.
seen such dramatic, beautiful mountains in my entire life. It was, like, the most stunning scenery.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's just, like, so dramatic, like, they're not quite like mountains you see in other places.
yeah, nothing like it, and then going down to the south, it's completely different, but it's still, like, the most beautiful coastal scenery I've ever seen with those,
Yeah.
like, dramatic cliffs and then the blue water and the boats and the houses stacked up against each other.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's just so beautiful. So, yeah, there's just so much to do for everyone, whether you're wanting, like, the beachy scene or the more mountainous, like, outdoorsy scene. Italy's the best.
For sure. I think, like, dramatic is, like, one word I would use to describe a lot of the nature in Italy, just, like yeah, dramatic.
Yeah.
Crazy cliff sides, crazy mountains.
So if you had to pick in the whole country, what are the top 5 attractions in Italy?
So that's definitely, like, hard to narrow down because there's just so many different things I could think about. I would say, like, at a glance, top 5, Colosseum's definitely up there just because, again, it's, like, very iconic to Italy and to Rome, and so, like, I think a lot of people are like, "I go to Rome, I have to see the Colosseum," and it is really impressive and cool, so definitely that's up there. The second one I would say is the Uffizi Museum in Florence. I kinda touched on this earlier, or actually I touched on this a couple times, but it's just an incredible museum, so much beautiful artwork. You need hours to wander the galleries and everything, and even, like, the building itself is really beautiful. Like, you look up to the ceilings, and they're all, like, frescoed, like, very, very detailed, so it's just a really beautiful place to visit when you're in Florence. And then, again, with Florence, I would say the Duomo specifically, like, Florence's Duomo. There are obviously, like, Duomos around Italy and really famous churches and everything, but I do think Florence's is particularly unique just because of, like, the actual dome of it, just because that's it like, other major cities, churches just aren't quite like that, and it's just incredible, and, like, everywhere you go in Florence, it's kind of like a North Star, like, you can look up, find the Duomo, and, like, orient yourself, and it's just super, super impressive and beautiful.
So the Duomo is a church, right? For listeners who might not know.
Yeah, so the Duomo in Florence, well, in Italy in general, they generally call, like, the main church within a square the Duomo. That's just, like, what they call
Good
it.
to know.
But in Florence specifically, it's like a domed church, like, there's a dome on it. It's not just like a cathedral, but it's just really, really unique and just, like, really impressive, and you can actually climb to the top of the dome and the top of the bell tower in the church. I actually recommend climbing to the top of the bell tower so you can see the dome instead of being on top of it for a unique perspective. But that church, if you wanna get technical, is called Santa Maria del Fiore Cathedral.
Amazing.
And then yeah, and then I would say Mount Etna in Sicily. I personally, I think, just have a thing for hiking volcanoes randomly, but Mount Etna is just really, really cool. It's the most active volcano in all of Europe, and it's just, like, sick. Like, you go and you climb the volcano, and the entire place feels, like, alive. It kind of feels like you're on another planet, to be honest, because the landscape is, like, it changes, it's, like, different colors, there's, like, no trees or, like, no, like, plants really or anything. It's just really crazy, and I think Sicily in general just gets overlooked, but Mount Etna is, like, super, super cool. So if you're interested in hiking and anything like that, Mount Etna is definitely a place to visit. So that leads me into my next one, which is Pompeii. And the volcano that overlooks Pompeii and, like, the whole Naples area is Mount Vesuvius. And so that's the one that, like, erupted and, like, covered Mount or Pompeii in ash. And so yeah, but Pompeii was gonna be my last one. Just there's, like, really, like, no place like it, and it's a lot bigger than people think. I think like, when I had first gone there, I was thinking, like, "Oh, it's gonna be this, like, archaeological site, you walk around, like, for a few hours, you're done." My friend and I spent all day there, and we didn't even see everything, and that is a place that I think getting a guided tour of, it's, like, worth it. So, yeah, Pompeii is just, very I don't know, makes you think a lot, and it's just kinda crazy to see, like, this whole entire ancient city, like, absolutely frozen in time. So that would be my last one.
Okay, so we've talked about all these different areas. So how would you recommend someone gets around Italy? Like, what are the best ways to navigate the country?
I would say the best ways to get around Italy are probably just trains and flying. They do have a pretty good train system, and so, like, you can get to so many different places just, like, via rail, and yeah, that's a great way to go. I would say the one thing, make sure you validate your ticket because that's a huge thing. You need to do that. And then as far as flying goes, like, if you're going, farther distances, obviously, from, like, the north to the south, or, like, you're in Milan and you wanna go down to Sicily, like, it obviously makes more sense to, like, take a plane. So, I would just say, like, rely on those 2 and just kind of compare prices and, like, think about your time, and what is actually, like, worth it. But if you're staying in, like, one area, you can for sure just get around with trains because there are, speed trains and then, like, smaller commuter trains that you could take to lesser known places. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and Nate and I kinda talked about this in our Europe episode about the budget airlines in all of Europe, but especially, like you
Yeah.
said, if you're going from, like, the northern part of the country to the south, it can be as cheap as, like, 20 or 30 euros just to get there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so I think definitely recommend flying, and then also, how do you feel about renting a car?
Okay, so I have never personally rented a car when I was in Italy, but when I went one time with my mom rented a car and I mean, she's brave, but like she didn't seem to have a problem with it. Also, like it was like a manual. So if you don't know how to drive a manual, that could be a problem. There are, I think, a lot more automatics now that you can rent, but like it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive to rent that. I don't know. I just think you probably need to be a pretty confident driver if you're gonna go to Italy. I know, Betty, you got injured going like, when you were in the Amalfi Coast, and the roads were kinda crazy, but, like, if you're driving somewhere chill and relaxed, you just wanna drive around Tuscany, you're probably fine. Like, you can do it and rent a car and you'll be fine. But I think if you're like, "I wanna road trip the entire country top to bottom," like, I wanna do, like, the Alps, and then I also wanna do the Amalfi Coast, like, just be a confident driver. Also, I think if you're gonna drive in Sicily, like, you should be a confident driver.
Yeah.
Just because I think things are a little bit more chaotic generally in the south of Italy, so
Yeah, I don't think
yeah.
driving in Italy is for the faint of heart at all. Yeah, I think some of you know that I broke my collarbone, but that was on a it was on a Vespa. So I rented a Vespa
Okay.
and we went from Naples to Sorrento and then took it all over the Amalfi Coast, which, as most people know, has super, super windy roads right on the cliffside. So,
Yeah.
I was brave, a little too brave, and I was going a little too fast. And yeah, that renting a Vespa is, just make sure you're extremely safe if you're gonna do that. But that was a great way to get around. It was super cheap and,
Yeah, yeah.
you can navigate these tiny little areas because 'cause you're just on like an electric scooter basically.
Yeah,
So, I recommend that to people if you're not an idiot like me.
for sure.
But my god, the drivers there, it's like I can't believe so many of the blind corners that we were going around, these motorcyclists would come
Uh,
and just no hesitation go around these giant tour buses, and somehow they were all fine.
yeah, definitely. When my mom was driving, we were, like, driving through the Alps, and I remember, like, I kinda looked out the window, and it's like, there's some guardrails, but it's, like, drop
Yeah,
off,
right
like, as
into the
far as, like,
ocean.
down the cliff. Yeah, and I was just like, "Oh my god, that's crazy."
Yeah, if you're
Yeah.
someone who has
Mm,
any kind of driving anxiety, let someone else be behind the wheel probably.
yeah, for sure.
So obviously every country has its different etiquette and culture. So what is some Italian etiquette that visitors should know before they go?
You should definitely, like, pack something like, if you're going in the summertime, pack something to cover your shoulders and, like, just be mindful if you're going into a lot of, like, churches and religious sites that you are going to need your shoulders and, like, pretty much your knees covered. So, if you're walking around in, like, shorts and a tank top, you will probably be denied entry into, like, a church. So, that's just something to kinda keep in mind if you know you're going to be doing those types of activities. It's yeah, obviously just respectful to, like, cover up when you go to a religious site like that, and there are so many in Italy. And then the other thing I would say, this has to do with coffee culture, and I kind of touched a little bit on this before, but, you can do this by all means, but they'll know you're American. So, like, for instance, a cappuccino, like, so many people love them. They're great, they're delicious. But if you drink them like after like 11 o'clock or noon, they'll definitely know you're an American because it's seen as more of like a breakfast type drink because it has so much milk in it. So if you like want a coffee in the afternoon and you're like, I'm gonna go the Italian way, just get like an espresso or something like that. Yeah, just kind of something to keep in mind. No one's gonna like, harass you for it, but it's just like
They'll
something
be
small.
silently judging you just a
Yeah.
little bit.
And then also just kinda, like, being polite whenever you're going into stores and just kind of greeting people, just saying, like, like, a buongiorno or, like, a buonasera, like, that type of thing, and, it's gonna vary a little bit by region as to, like, what specific word you should say at what time, but just, like, a simple greeting is, like, it's courteous whenever you enter a store, it's kinda rude if you don't say anything. So, yeah, I would say those are a couple of things, and also just expect, like, the culture to generally be slower than what it is in the US, so, like, whenever you go out to dinner, like, take your time and they're expecting you to take your time. You will probably have to ask for the check whenever you're ready to go, but things in Italy just move slower. And I think this is kind of like a stereotype or like there's some quote or phrase about this, but I would say the more south you get in Italy, the slower things are. Just like, more in the north, there's a lot of cities. And so things are maybe a tiny bit more fast paced for like Italian standards, but the more south you go, like, things are just a little bit more relaxed and even slower, so just kinda something to keep in mind.
So, on the note of language, when you said, like, saying buongiorno or buonasera, what's the language barrier like in Italy? Do quite a few people speak English?
Yeah, I would say if you're in, like, the big cities, for sure, like, you should be fine. Most people, especially when you're at, like, an attraction or a hotel or something like that, something for tourists, people are gonna speak English, and you really shouldn't have that much trouble with it. But at the same time, you should learn a few keywords in Italian. I think it's just, like, polite to do that, and also, like, you are in their country, so I just think, like, speaking a little bit like, not expecting people to always cater to you is just, like, something to keep in mind. But I think, the more rural you go and I'd say like a little farther south you go, you're going to encounter like less English speakers. Like a lot of people definitely do speak English, but it's not going to be like as widespread as if you're like saying Rome or Milan. And so just picking up some key phrases is important. And as far as just like a language barrier, I think, like, there can be a bit of a language barrier sometimes. If you don't speak any Italian or, like, learning a bit of the language intimidates you, you can definitely just, like, use a translator app or, like, just have one on your phone, either, like, the photo one on Google where you can, like, scan things and it'll show you the English translations or just, like, an app so you can communicate with someone, like, when you're ordering at a restaurant. I think those are obviously just helpful tools to have and can kinda help you be a little less scared with the language barrier that comes up.
So we're coming to the end of our episode now, and I want to talk about safety because I know that some parts of Italy are definitely a little bit crowded and crazy, and some people might feel a little bit intimidated about their safety. So how would you characterize that in the country?
Yeah, so I would say overall, like Italy is pretty safe, but kind of like what I was saying with other things earlier, it does just kind of vary by like region and north or south. There is a bit of reality to that. So I think as far as safety goes, the things that you should kind of be on the lookout for, the first being pickpocketing. That is pretty common with tourists, especially in like really crowded places where people like know that there are tourists. Just like have a secure bag, something that can be like very like attached to your person, whether it's like a crossbody bag or like a fanny pack, something like that. And keep a hand on your bag and just keep it in front of you, like where you could see it, and just be mindful of your surroundings when you are somewhere really crowded. I personally have, like, never experienced pickpocketing when like, being in Italy, and the people that I've traveled with, they've never been pickpocketed, but again, I think it kinda boils down to, like, just be mindful of your surroundings, and keep an eye on your bag and or hand. So I would say that's the first thing. Something else, there is a bit of panhandling in Italy. Again, it depends where you are, but it's just kind of something to be mindful of, and I don't wanna be I wanna be sensitive to people, but at the same time, like, for your own safety, I think it is the smartest thing to just kind of, like, not engage and just kinda keep it moving. And then for, like, women specifically, it is true that, like, there is, like, catcalling in Italy and, like, you're gonna get a lot more of that, and I don't know, just, like, more attention, like, from men is going to be a little bit more, like, in your face than I think it would be in some other places, so there's probably, some, like, whistles or ciao bellas and, like, just kinda catcalling, so the best thing to do is, again, not engage, just kinda keep it moving, but you should be fine as long as you follow, like, normal safety precautions that you would, like, pretty much anywhere else in Europe.
Good to know. If you could wrap up every single thing that we've talked about in the episode today, what is the main reason or reasons that you think somebody should visit Italy?
Think the ultimate reason that people should travel to Italy or consider traveling to Italy is just like if you really want that like dreamy old world European feel in a place that has a lot of character, I think Italy is definitely the place for that. And also, the food is so amazing. And yeah, just between like the food, the art, the nature, the people, like you're going to have a really memorable time for sure. And, when you're drinking like good wine and pasta and gelato every day, it's hard not to be happy. So, yeah, maybe plan a trip to Italy.
Okay, I think that's all we have for today. Listeners, please make sure to go and check out Lea Rose's Italy guides at travellemming.com. She's actually created a parent article that includes links to all of her related Italy content. So we'll link that in the show notes as well as the other articles that we mentioned today. But that one's super helpful. She also has guides to Chicago and Asheville and some wonderful perspective pieces on the website. So go read them after the episode. Once again, those are on travellemming.com. Just type in Italy in the search bar. And whatever your Italy planning entails, I bet you Lea Rose has written a super helpful article for you. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We have new episodes coming out covering different travel topics and destinations around the world. You can also come and meet a member of our team and talk travel at our community meetups, which we host in 8 major cities in and around the US. And Lea Rose actually hosts the Chicago meetup, so you can meet her. And all the information for our travel meetups is on the website. Thank you again to our sponsor, Tortuga Backpacks. You guys rock. Thank you, Lea Rose, for sharing your Italy expertise with the world. You've been an absolute delight today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love being able to talk about Italy, so I had a great time.
Listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Travel Lemming podcast.